Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the VUU. This is Michael Tino joining you from Peekskill, New York. It's good to be back with you all. Christina, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christina Rivera, and I'm joining you from Charlottesville, Virginia.
It's great to actually finally be co-hosting with you, Christina.
Right back at you.
Since you've joined the VUU crew, you and I have sort of missed alternate weeks, so it's great to be here. And as usual, we have Jessica Star Rockers, who's doing tech. Welcome back, Jessica, after a cold month in Chicago.
Thank you. Good to be back.
And you'll be monitoring Twitter at the VUU.
Hashtag the VUU. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, and I'm also fielding your questions on Facebook and on YouTube.
Awesome. So hashtag the VUU, VUU. And are you going behind the chalice today, or
I'm going behind. I'm trying to get back in the swing of things.
We'll see you in an hour then. Take care. And joining us this week, it looks like from UUA headquarters in Boston, Massachusetts, is Bart Frost, Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministries at the UUA headquarters. Welcome back, Bart.
Thanks, Michael and Christina. It's always glad to be with the VUU and CLF.
So I've been told that there are some exciting new programs bubbling up in youth ministry at the UUA. So maybe you should just start by telling us about them. We'll go right for that.
Dive right in. Yeah, no, I'd love to talk about it. So one of the new collaborations across our UUA has been the Youth Ministry Roundtable. And we just met again in January. There's this thing called the Big Alignment Meeting, which is when all of the congregational life staff from across the country come to Boston for a really big meeting. They call it BAM. And part of that was the Youth Ministry Roundtable, which we gather virtually every 2 months or so. And we're working on kind of new theories and figuring out where the direction of youth ministry and Unitarian Universalism should go. And we also bring in the College of Social Justice to partner with us on that. And one of the things that we've been working on is this youth ministry revival concept. We just had our second one it was in Mid-America, outside of Chicago, Palatine, Illinois. And this past fall, and it was really cool. Eric Bliss started this. He's the Pacific Western Region's youth ministry specialist a couple years ago in Portland, actually, and brought in youth and adult teams from across the Pacific Western region to talk about spiritual practice. Eric, when he got his position, interviewed, I believe, 12 congregations that had vibrant youth ministry programs and realized that beyond check-in and chalice lighting, none of them shared spiritual practices with youth. And so this has been a major focus of our work, our office's work, and the Youth Ministry Roundtable's work is focusing on faith formation. How do we move from leadership development to faith formation and spiritual development? So that's something that we've been working on. And we're really excited that in 2019, spring of 2019, so a year away, this is an early promo, we're hoping to do a third one outside of DC. We know that the DC area has some really vibrant congregations and vibrant ministries. We haven't selected a site yet, but we're hoping that that site will be able to pull folks from as far west as Pittsburgh, as far south as maybe South Carolina, Tennessee, hopefully, and as far north as Connecticut or New York. To kind of, it's the driving distance works, although we all know DC traffic is horrible. So we'll have to factor that in as well. So the major focus of the youth ministry revivals are spiritual practices, creating communities of care, and there's a justice dismantling white supremacy element included as well. We've been throwing around some themes, but it's really amazing because it's a collaboration between all of these different regions, all 5 different regions, our office, the College of Social Justice, religious professionals from the area, and youth leaders from not just the area, but also outside of, we'll probably bring in some from Mid-America, some from the Western region, definitely some from Central East to help with this as well. it's a new model and it's a new practice, and we're looking forward to developing this and turning it into something that's maybe doesn't happen every year, but happens when it needs to happen.
So from what I understand from what you just said, it's we're working on helping our congregations and guiding our congregations in really being containers and for the spiritual development of youth. I mean, go figure. That's like what religious communities are need help with. But that sounds fantastic. I'll be happy to load up a van full of youth and adults in New York and drive down to DC. That sounds really exciting.
I really liked what you said, Bart, is from moving from leadership to spiritual development, because that is so key for not just for our youth, really for all of our Unitarian Universalists, but that identity formation around being Unitarian Universalist to me is really key, in that there is so much going on right now regarding social justice. Like, people have a lot of choices about how they go about doing social justice, and our congregations, I think, sometimes struggle with what do we bring to that, and they forget that, you know, we're a faith, we're a religion, and that spiritual identity. So can you speak a little bit more about how these youth revivals maybe are addressing that particular part of it?
Yeah, so y'all are right. And youth ministry within the UUA tends to be kind of a incubator for change throughout the association. You know, I say to visiting youth groups, youth lead the way. They've always led the way. And youth ministry continues to lead the way in Unitarian Universalism. We see our young folks, they're the ones who, especially our young adults, are pushing very heavily on our congregations to respond to not just Trump times, but also to respond with love to many things. So what I've noticed, so I just finished reading Powered by Girl, which is a new Beacon Press book, not so new Beacon Press book, about supporting young women in activism. And reading that, I realized, that their strategies are very similar to a lot of our youth adult relationship models. You know, what's the adult's responsibility? What's the youth's responsibility? But what it really lifted up for me is that we're not the only place for youth to learn these skills anymore. I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in the UU Fellowship of Raleigh, North Carolina. I was the only UU in my school. One of the few liberal folks who was openly political, and church was the place where I learned my activism skills, where I learned organizing skills. But we aren't that place anymore. So we do need to reemphasize that we're a faith tradition, and I'm hoping that by lifting up that we're a faith that's rooted in justice, that our values promote liberation and justice for all, that we can help recenter it. And I'm even seeing this, I mean, I got to be honest with y'all and with everyone watching. I think that our adults have some faith formation work that they need to be doing. And you know, it's heartbreaking sometimes. When I consult with congregations, I always do the little bit like, if it's a time for all ages, then why is it, you know, isn't worship for all ages? We're in this moment now, right? Where we're addressing the death of Sunday school, where we're looking forward into what might be created. And we set our youth up so they do 12 years of religious education if they're with us, you know, their entire school age years, and then they move into the congregation. And I know Joy Berry is doing some stuff around rot faith and Fowler stages, and I'd argue that our young folks leave because they reach that 4th, 5th, and 6th stage, the highest levels of identity and awareness and acceptance of religion, and the rest of the congregation isn't there. So my hope is by sending youth and adult teams to these youth ministry revivals, that they can bring back spiritual practices, a grounding in Unitarian Universalism that they can then share with the wider congregation. And the justice stuff is woven in. It's something that we're trying to continue to build on in the past. I know that many of our youth programs when I was a youth, which was like 15 years ago now, we always included at least an hour a day of anti-racism, anti-oppression work. We're bringing that model back. And we're also moving to include caucusing opportunities at all events for youth of color and white youth to explore their identity and to explore the way white supremacy and internalized oppression and superiority play out in our communities. And to be aware that we need to be responsive and proactive in promoting these values. I think I tried to hit everything there, but I might have missed something.
No, I think that's exactly to the point of those spiritual development stages, and where our youth are leading us, right, in ways that our adults need to catch up and or center the youth experience, because the youth have done so much more of that work. So in our congregations, if we're looking at youth leadership as leadership, it's actually, in many cases, actually spiritual development leadership, right? Because they're actually doing it. But what you said about caucusing was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, is how do you see these revivals, or in particular, but more broadly, that we're supporting youth of color? Because caucusing is wonderful, but it's not the only thing. So are there other program within a program in place, or can you speak a little bit towards that?
So not currently. We've only done 2 iterations of it, and they've been very different. So our regions have very different expressions of youth ministry, which is fair. And the Pacific Western region, when the first one was a very large event, over 120 participants, and there wasn't a program within a program. It was a pilot, a launch, a test. And then this past one in Mid-America, we actually set aside a chunk of money. Nancy Combs Morgan and I worked together because we have some not external funding sources. The Katie Tyson Fund supported getting youth and adults of color to Mid-America's youth ministry revival. So we're trying to support financially as well as work in smaller ways of support. I could see in the future an opportunity for program within a program. What was really great, what I've noticed where I sit on the balcony, the work that Reverend Elizabeth Wynn did in her role as Youth and Young Adults of Color Ministry Associate really has set up our faith in a really wonderful way. I'm seeing more youth of color and young adults of color involved in national leadership opportunities, in regional leadership opportunities, and in reflecting on the staff team for the Mid-America Youth Ministry Revival. I have to say, I think it was probably one of the most diverse staff teams in terms of identity, skills, location, and it was mostly youth of color, and they're mostly Thrive alumni. So that's really great to see that the connections are being made, and that they know the youth of color are also building a community, which I think is absolutely vital for the ministry and for our faith.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I'm going to ask you to talk about Thrive in just a second. I know that recently I had a need for a particular subset of youth of color to give me feedback on a project that a group of us are working on, and it was so beautiful to see them not scramble. Like, they created a group chat, boom, boom, boom. They knew who their peers are for this particular. I was looking for a Latinx subset, which is really even smaller within the youth of color group, but it was, I hadn't seen that before, that ability to just be able to reach out and know some of those folks. So maybe you can speak a little bit about Thrive for folks that don't know what that is.
Yeah, so definitely speak about Thrive. I do want to lift up what you said, though, Christina, about connection. So I just watched this Barna Gen X research results stuff that they did, and it was kind of cringy. Sorry, Barna, if you're watching. But they called it was Gen Zers. My bad. Gen Xers is Michael. and I'm a millennial. Gen Z's the next one. Not a huge fan of that name, but they called them screenagers. And I was like, no, don't do that. Why are you doing that, y'all? Because what I've seen is they're able to communicate, they stay in communication, and it broadens their network. They're not on Facebook, which is okay. I get it. If I was a young person, I wouldn't want to be on Facebook with me either. But the levels of connection through Snapchat and Instagram, the ability to like just pull together a group chat real quick, these are skills that are dynamic and literally transforming our faith and our communities. I was just at the board meeting with you, and the youth observer Tanner shared, one of the youth observers, Tanner, he's a summer seminary alumni, and he shared that they still have a Snapchat group, and they have we do a group me for all of our programs. That's a text-based kind of chat room so that we can keep everyone, send announcements out, communicate. And there's still that group, which met at Harvard Div in July for a week, are still communicating on the group me and sharing joys and sorrows, what's going on in their lives, and that's awesome. Like, we did that back in the day, but we did it back with Facebook, and this is so much more immediate, and just the care that I'm seeing, and I know it extends to the Thrive schools too. So I just wanted to share that because there's so much negativity around youth and technology, when in reality, it's like this wonderful world of opportunities. It's got some pitfalls. We need to educate our young folks about those pitfalls, but there's so much opportunity for youth ministry and connection and building a faith movement that is responsive and deeply cares for one another. I seriously can't remember seeing youth care for each other in this way, in a group setting online. But to talk a little bit about Thrive. So Thrive is our leadership school for youth of color. We also partner with the College of Social Justice to do Grow Racial Justice, and Thrive Young Adult is the young adult of color cohort of that program. Shift is the white cohort, the white young adult cohort, and that's the grounded resilient organizers workshop. That's what Grow stands for. Thrive Youth is an extension. So Elizabeth, in her work, she built out the Multicultural Leadership School, which was our leadership school for youth and young adults of color prior to Elizabeth's work in our office, into 2 Thrive Youth programs to try and make it more accessible, and the Thrive Young Adult program. So we have a Thrive Youth East and a Thrive Youth West. East this year, I believe, is going to be at First Parish, Cambridge, here in Massachusetts, just a short T ride away from headquarters. And West, we're still working on dates and such, but I believe we'll be at the Long Beach congregation. And stay tuned for your UU bulletin, that wonderful monthly email y'all get that tells you what's going on, because that's when we'll announce that the applications are open for Thrive. It is a rolling application. It's not a competitive program. We want all youth of color to be able to attend. And the mission of Thrive is to provide opportunities for youth of color to learn together, to deepen their faith together, to build community, to feast, to laugh, to sing, to worship, and not just a youth of color community, but also religious professionals of color are vital for this work. And so I just want to give a brief shout out to all the folks who might be watching who've given their time and their energy to our Thrive Youth programs. It's such crucial work, and it gladdens my heart to see folks like Aisha take part and support those programs, or Sana Saeed, or India, just Kimberly Quinn Johnson. There's just a whole cohort of folks, and I know I'm leaving people out. I don't have the staff list up right now, but y'all have my deepest gratitude, because ministry to our youth of color is deeply important.
So we were joking a little bit before we went on the air, just to let our VUU listeners and watchers know that there's a bylaw that says that we have to, every now and then be disappointed in our institutions. And I think part of that is just that our institutions, be it the UUA or our congregations, are organizations created by humans with human systems of power embedded in them. So, we've been working really hard at rooting out white supremacy culture in our institutions because it's there. And we're going to be working for a long time rooting that out. I hope that we'll be successful in that endeavor, but it's going to be a lot of work for a lot of people for a long time. So, I've been around enough youth ministry for long enough that I've seen cycles of things happen, and so it makes my heart sing that you're talking about communities of youth of color forming and supporting one another and sustaining themselves as communities. And I know that at some point our institutions are going to disappoint those communities of youth of color. And I hope and pray that it's not in a really big way like it has been in the past. So I'm wondering, because we have a chance to learn from our history, right? I'm wondering what we're doing to prepare for that, to make sure that our institution responds the way an institution should when it disappoints people, when it falls short of its values, and that our youth of color stay at the table, or have the strength, or whatever it is to move through that disappointment with us, because I've seen too many folks hit that level of, I'm disappointed in our institution, it has failed me, especially with regard to systemic racism and oppression, and we've lost folks. Folks have left, and that it breaks my heart that folks who were parts of really strong communities, especially of youth of color, are not Unitarian Universalist anymore. So I'm wondering what we're doing to prepare for that, because I'm just assuming that our institutions will let people down. And so as hard as we're working, and as hard as we're going to work, our institutions, being human and being steeped in the systems of power and oppression that we have in our society, they're going to fail. And I mean, it's not acceptable that they fail, but it's predictable.
And I think it's because we're working so hard.
Oh, sure.
That, if we weren't, if we were just taking the quote unquote easy road, we probably wouldn't. And so I'm as painful as those failures are, I'm glad for them, but I like the question of what are we doing to prepare for it.
I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't have, our office doesn't have a response plan for breaking hearts, and shattering faith. If I can, I'll be honest. What I can say is that over the past year, I've seen the UUA go through a really tough, like 6-month, 8-month period that I personally haven't seen, and I've been around for a while, and I've seen some really difficult reactions. I've personally been pulled in many directions in terms of how I react to things. What I can say is I think Susan and Carrie's leadership puts us in a different place. I'm just in awe of Susan's leadership as president, and Carrie's got a deep tie to our youth and young adults of color. He had my role before I fell into it. And I know Carrie cares deeply for not just youth and young adults across the association, but youth and young adults of color especially. And so I'm holding out a little hope, trying not to be the cynical one who's been around forever and served in so many, denominational volunteer positions that that I've had my heart broken, to hold out a little hope and to also witness the extreme care that the Board of Trustees has been going through. I mean, I can't even. I supported the Youth Observers at their April meeting last year, and I just this past board meeting and the October board meeting, it's a different culture, and Alandria and Barb bring leadership to that. And I know Alandria and Barb both care deeply, and many. I think this is fair to say that all of the Board of Trustees deeply cares about the youth of our faith and recognizes that we need to do better for our youth of color than what's happened in the past. It's hard. I think I heard this attributed to Teresa Cooley once. It might be a misattribution, but someone along the way said, "You're not Unitarian Universalist until it's broken your heart and you've come back again." And that's a really crappy, can I say crappy? I just said it twice. Really crappy thing to have happen 3 times. And not the best, right? And at the same time, it is very true that Unitarian Universalism is going to break your heart eventually, and we have to begin again in love. We're a covenantal faith. And so for me, I think it's about recognizing what our covenant and our responsibilities are, acknowledging when we fall short, and hoping to make to do better in the future. It's
I think
hard.
that's part of the hope, right? So if in working on spiritual development for all ages, part of what we do is reintroduce people to the theologies of covenant. Then there maybe we're also giving people some tools, some spiritual tools to stay with people who break your heart. I mean, because that's what covenant can be. It can be a tool for exclusion, or it can be a tool to stay with people who have broken your heart, right? And if we frame it as that, we maybe got a tool there in our kit.
And I want to be honest too that you can only have your heart broken so many times. And if it's becoming a slog and it's hard, then I hope folks can find spiritual communities and communities that can support them, and that we get feedback so that we can work to transform our system, even if that is hard to hear. And I hope that we as an institution and as a faith can internalize that feedback and say, we do need to make some changes. And, some of the stuff that I saw over the past year were folks saying, I don't want to make these changes. And that's not covenantal either. It's, institutions don't want to change. Nobody likes change, but you can't dig your feet in. You got to be willing to take a step forward and to do the hard work. And if you're not willing to do it, then maybe this isn't the faith for you. I don't want to step out of bounds as an employee of the UUA, but one of the things I say is that our youth ministry programs don't need to cater to all youth. Even as a religious educator, if you're not getting your needs met in youth group or in RE or in worship, then it's okay for you to stay home on Sunday morning if you're getting your spirit fed in other ways. Now, if you're staying home on Sunday morning and you're not getting your spirit fed, we should have a conversation, a pastoral conversation. But if you're getting your needs fed in other ways, then yes, that's okay. And I think that what we need to do is, what if I ruled the world, to bring in an old 90s hip hop song, I believe that's Nas, I would declare that we do some really hardcore faith formation education for adults, because I think that's the way that we stop breaking hearts, not just the hearts of our youth of color, but also our hearts of young folks who grow up in this faith and then move into a congregation or move cities and get asked over and over, so how'd you find Unitarian Universalism? Who don't, I tell every youth group that comes to, I've told your youth group, Michael, your coming of age group, it's our Unitarian Universalism. That means it's yours. And no matter what church you go into, that's your church too. And I don't think everyone has that understanding. Our polity and the smallness of our faith makes it difficult for folks to really internalize that. When you're the only UU church in town, it's hard to see the larger connections. It's hard to build those larger connections. And if we do, I think we'll be able to keep our young folks and to at least mitigate some of that heartbreak most of the time. If we all have a deeper understanding of our UU faith, our UU theology, what it calls us to, where it calls us to be in the world, how we stand with love, that's my hope. And that's why that's why I love youth and young adult ministry, is because I see that that's a transformative place for our faith. Sorry, I just got up on my soapbox.
No, it's great because it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is that connection. And so I think that, when Continental YRUU was at its best, it was about that connection, right? And we had those channels to make that connection in ways that was really, really meaningful to our youth. And so now I think we're in that process of, how do we do that now? And how do we build more opportunities for that connection? Because you're right, so often our youth may be the only congregation for 100 miles around, and it's really hard to know, not to know that you can intellectually know that there's other youth out there, but to actually have that connection with other youth out there. And so I'm thrilled to hear that that's such a focus of what the roundtable is doing. And actually what you said kind of transitioned over, unless Michael, you have another comment on this, is so we often look at Bart and say youth, but the other part of your title is young adult ministries, right? And so we're building these youth, we're building this connection, and it's a very small amount of time if we're technically talking about youth, right? Because it's only the 4-year span. So what does that look like then going into the young adult ministry?
So again, I'm just in a real honest mood today. So we know that, Michael served as director of young adult ministry back in the day. And it's been my experience that when we have positions that are both youth and young adult ministry, that the young adult ministry actually gets set aside. Youth ministry feels more timely. It's just generally, more happy. People like, youth. Young adults, it's hard. Young adult ministry is hard. And that's something that we're working on. So our office is really, while the age range remains 18 to 35, we're committing the majority of our resources to supporting 18 to 24-year-olds. That's the age called emerging adults, although my understanding is that emerging adulthood language comes out of some really flawed studies focused only on middle-class white young adults. So there's still some things emerging about emerging adulthood. But we also know that adolescence has been extended. So social scientists are saying that adolescence begins at 10. And that's when we're like asking our kids to like really take tests and to ramp up the academics and responsibilities. And it ends at 24 because of, well, a variety of reasons, lack of economic opportunities, schooling has been extended. There's a theory about helicopter parenting. I don't know where I sit on that right now, but that we've extended adolescence to 24. And and that's a really vital age range. We're seeing a lot of mental health, I don't want to say issues or incidents, but an increase in mental health emergencies with our young adults, our emerging adults, that we're trying to figure out how to navigate. And we also know that we're not the only ones who lose our young adults when they graduate high school. Everybody loses them. Growing Young has a great exercise in it. Growing Young's my new youth and young adult ministry Bible that I've been talking about. They have an exercise where they say, take a picture of your youth group and cross out 50% of the faces. That's how many you're going to lose. Once, that's just the statistics. For us, it's 90. It's 90%. We lose 90% of our young folks, and it's just astounding. And part of that isn't just on us. So we, as an institution, our congregations have a big role to play in that. And it's also developmentally appropriate. One goes off to school, or they start a new job, they go out into the world. You want to create independence. And at the same time, you really need a community that has your back and that supports you in spiritual grounding. So we're still trying to figure that out. And I think the UUA has been trying to figure this out for a long time. I remember the Mind the Gap campaign. It's one of the reasons we started the Meaning Makers program, is to provide emerging adults an opportunity to explore their faith and to go deep. Annie and I are looking at what the next steps might be. Annie's our young adult and campus ministry associate. What the next steps for that program might be, how it might, does the focus need to change? How do we build it out so that it's doable? I know that other of our, other camps and conferences are working on programs like this. Roe has skill set for the same age range. It's something that we're going to have to really come to terms with. Campus ministry is hard. We tell we advise that, there are ways to do it. And Annie's always available for a consult. So if you're watching this and you want to you want to reach out about support and get a consultation on campus ministry or young adult ministry, you can email Annie at yacm@uua.org, or you can email me, and I'm sure that'll be in the show notes, is how you can send an email to me. But these are ways that we're just trying to be adaptive, and to meet the challenges. So to back up a little bit, I realized I dropped Meaning Makers, but I didn't give any extended introduction. So Meaning Makers is in its, let's see, we're in our second cohort. So we use cohort language, and right now it's a year-long program that begins with a retreat and ends with a retreat. And in between, there's monthly small group ministry meetings online. It's for 18 to 24-year-olds, 18 to 24, not 18 to 35. And right now we're meeting at VUU in San Antonio, Texas, and the next one will be in June, and the applications open up February 1st. So if you are a young adult 18 to 24, or a young adult 18 to 24 that wants to deepen their connections to Unitarian Universalism, learn spiritual practice skills and adulting skills and worship together and be in community, applications open February 1st, and it's, I believe, I have to look up the registration contact, so or the costs. You can go to uua.org/meaningmakers though if you want to look it up. And the first cohort finished last June, and they're still in communication with each other. They spent an entire year, and the second cohort launched last June, and it's still in pilot stages. We're still figuring out what works, what's needed, and that in between space, right? So like, people will tell you what they want, but you also have to meet what they might not know what they need. So we're trying to find that balance between want and need. And we're hoping the next one will be in June, the beginning of June, at UBarU again. And we're looking at if it might be a shortened program to 6 months, or still a year-long program. A year feels like a lot to commit. 6 months might be too short. We're trying to navigate this changing landscape. And just thanks so much to Jessica who did the research. Meeting Makers is $200 per retreat. I didn't want to say the wrong number and then have people quote me. I think legally, if I say the wrong number, we have to honor that. So I didn't want to make that mistake. So it is $200 per retreat, and so it's affordable. And as with all of our programs, Thrive, Summer Seminary, Meaning Makers, we offer scholarships and travel subsidies because we know it's hard, especially for young adults, to afford these opportunities, and we try to make them as cost effective. And partially that's through support of the Katie Tyson Fund and also through the generous contributions of your congregations. And you can become a friend of the UUA today. And that ends the stewardship and development pitch.
So we do have in the notes the link to the Katie Tyson Fund. Whenever people are kind of curious as to how they can support youth ministry, I definitely point them to the UUA Friends Fund, but also particularly the Katie Tyson Fund, and we're thrilled to be able to put that in links. Which brings me kind of what you were talking about. One quick question about Meaning Makers, and then I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about Summer Seminary, because people hear that and they're like, does that mean that everybody's going to be a minister? I mean, like, what's that all about? So, because seminary gives people a particular thought process that goes on a little bit. But the Meaning Makers, so is that facilitated by a religious professional, or is it completely young adults self-facilitated? Can you say a little bit more about that?
So Annie's the program director for Meaning Makers, and so she runs most of it. We bring in additional staff members. So in the past, last year, we also partnered with the CUC in the Southern region. So Natalie Briscoe from the Southern region came, and Aisha Hauser from the CUC, their youth and young adult ministries person, came down. We had a huge contingent of Canadian young adults, which was really cool this past year. And then Marcus Hartleaf, sorry, I know him by his pre-married name, and so I have to keep up. And he serves as co-minister of one of the British Columbia congregations, and is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. I've known Marcus for years, and he came to support the program this past year. The year before, we had Natalie, myself, Annie, and then KP Wong, who serves as a religious educator at Unity in St. Paul. And it's a great program, and so we do bring in additional faculty to support that, different skills, different talents, to navigate what's necessary. And we're still in the process of crafting next year. So if you're out there, you might get in. We try to invite folks to serve who bring a passion for young adults, for Unitarian Universalist young adults, and also knowing that many of our religious professionals are tapped and over capacity already, we try and make sure we're not adding to that stress.
We thank you. So, sorry, Michael, did you have a question on there? Yeah. So Summer Seminary, can you speak a little bit about that? Because I think people have a preconceived notion of what Summer Seminary might be all about, and it would be great for people who are watching and listening to just hear a little bit more, because it has been, and it seems like it's continuing to be a really transformative experience for some youth.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk about Summer Seminary. So Summer Seminary is a program for youth who've completed 10th through 12th grade in the previous school year, or the homeschool equivalent. And although the name is Summer Seminary, it's not explicitly for youth who want to become a minister in the future. That is where the program started. So there was a white paper, I believe, that was released, and I think it's somewhere on uua.org, about funneling folks into ministry. I think there was a fear that we were going to come up against a minister shortage. I'm not the person to talk to about that. You want to talk to Keith or David Petit. about that. But that's part of where the program came from. It's inspired by other youth summer seminary-like programs. Emory has one called the Youth Theological Initiative. Duke has one, although Duke Divinity School isn't, my understanding, is not super friendly to Unitarian Universalists, but they have a youth academy. So this is kind of our version of it. And it's a week-long program. It rotates every year. This year, we're actually going to be at Meadville Lombard in Chicago. Last year, we were at Harvard Divinity School. We've also been at ILIF, which is a Methodist seminary, but a lot of UU ministers have come out of ILIF in Denver, and Star King, of course, as well. And it's really, Jenica and I both identify as religious educators, so there is a heavy portion on kind of just religious education, but it's for youth who are thinking about being a Unitarian Universalist religious professional. That might be a musician, that could be a minister, a community minister, a chaplain. We get a lot of youth who are interested in chaplaincy, including military chaplaincy, not just hospital chaplaincy. Might want to be a religious educator, and that's the primary audience for this program. We do cap it at 25. It is a small program, and there's some space. So I know in the past some youth have applied and gotten in, who are really, I'm very glad that they participated. And I remember the story of one of our youth at Star King who during lunch confessed that she was going to university to study math. And I looked her in the eye and I said, well, the UUA has a finance department. And she actually broke into tears, knowing that she could do both what she loved, math, and live her faith together. So there's some space for that as well. It isn't a leadership school, so it's not Goldmine, it's not Youth Midwest Leadership School. It's really, I don't want to narrow it too tightly, but the way I pitch it typically is, if you've got a youth who always ends up on the chancel on Sunday morning as your worship associate, you should send them to summer seminary. You got a youth that's, actually not digging the rest of religious education, but loves teaching an RE class, send them our way. That's who summer seminary is really for. And it does, I struggle with it as someone who's been told, as a religious educator who on a Sunday morning after, absolutely killing the story for all ages, had people come up and ask me if I'm going to go to seminary. I totally get that it looks like the only opportunities to continue to remain once you hit those higher levels of faith formation is to become a religious professional. But I'm just really excited. Our first program alumni has entered Divinity School, Jamie Dingus, who started Harvard Div and actually came back for the summer to lead some portions. I know of a couple other folks who are going, and I also know of some folks who summer seminary actually taught them that professional ministry is not where they want to go, which is great. That kind of discernment is really important, but it's so unique compared to everything else. We do call the participants students. It is to give a look into what seminary might be, and it's not youth led. So that's a big change for a lot of our youth. I remember my first year after orientation having a couple of youth be like, wait, we're not expected to lead anything except a worship? Nope, you aren't. We ask our youth to lead a lot. And sometimes it's nice to just get your spirit fed and to sit back and to just absorb things. And so that's what summer seminary is. And I got to say, they lead, they're leaders, but they're not leading the program. We do care groups, and I watched just this wonderful community of care be created at summer seminary this past year. The youth were deeply invested in our faith and in one another and in caring for one another. And it was just, I'm not a crier, but it brings tears to my eyes to think about that. just the community that was created. And like I said, they're still caring for one another. They're on the group me, they're on Snapchat, they're still connected, and they're going to be colleagues. I mean, we're such a small faith that hopefully they'll all stick around and they'll know each other for years. I was just talking to Greg Boyd, who's a member of the Board of Trustees. Greg and I started in VUU together, and we have this huge network of friends, many who aren't UU anymore because of, you know, all of the things that Michael mentioned earlier, but also still connected. And that's I'm excited that these young folks are Thrive participants, are Summer Seminary participants, are Meaning Makers participants, have a community of peers and mentors that care deeply about them. That's ministry.
Yeah, and you talk about Summer Seminary as people who maybe see themselves called to being a religious professional, but I love being a religious professional. I love the different kinds of religious professionals that we have who can be a team together doing wonderful things. And at the same time, we also need passionate lay leaders in our congregations who are committed to theology and worship and covenant and I mean people who your UU mathematician might never be a professional in one of our congregations, but might be like the most amazing lay worship leader you've ever seen. Or faith development teacher for a multi-age faith development program in their congregation, and a mathematician at the same time. So it's great because we need all of that. So I just want to say to our viewers, not necessarily to you, Bart, because I or you, Christina, you both know this. Um, it's it seminary is not like the graduate level of faith. And summer seminary doesn't need to be an introduction to the graduate level of faith. It can just be a way to deepen it, so that you can do that work in our congregations. I mean, we need moderators of the UUA who who are willing to run our association's governance, steeped in covenant and theology and history, but who are volunteers.
Yeah, Bart and I were having that conversation a little bit while we were at the board retreat. Was that we don't necessarily need more bankers or soccer players or investment professionals, but we do need more Unitarian Universalist bankers and Unitarian Universalist soccer players and Unitarian Universalist master cellists. And so it's that faith identity that we're trying to build out in the world. And so if they bring that to be a religious professional, great. But if they bring that to a boardroom somewhere else, that's fantastic. Or if they bring that to the armed forces or working wherever they are, it's building that capacity for Unitarian Universalists to be part of their foundational identity, which is why I'm so grateful for the work that the Youth and Young Adult Office does.
And if you have questions about the Summer Seminary program, please, Jenica is our Youth Ministry Associate, and Jenica is the Program Director for Summer Seminary and General Assembly Youth Caucus and our Luminary Leaders Program. But feel free to please send an email to youth@uua.org. Jenica would love to hear from you as well, and she couldn't make it today. But it's I also just want to say it's not just our office that's doing this work. I know I can be really I love my team. I love the work that we do. I love our colleagues in the field. It's congregational life staff, throughout the UUA. They're doing this work. Religious educators, ministers. It's a team effort to build lifelong, deeply engaged, deeply connected, covenantal Unitarian Universalists. It's not just us. We just have a couple of really splashy and necessary programs that make it easy to talk about all these opportunities. But there's gold mines, and there's cons, and there's rallies, and there's spiritual development workshops, and so much more. And if you have questions about all those possibilities, we're here to help you navigate those too.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Bart. I know that part of the challenge of being in a position like yours is just making sure that our congregations know that they can actually call you. When we would have congregations call us when I worked in the young adult and campus ministry office back in the day, as you said, Bart. They would be shocked. They're like, wait, we actually got someone on the phone, and you're actually helping us. Like, yeah, that's what actually we're here for. I mean, we create these marvelous resources in between helping our congregation.
And we love to do it, y'all. Like, seriously, like, please, we love to talk to y'all. It's one of my favorite parts of the job is consultations. So do not hesitate to reach out. It's why y'all give money to the UUA. So not why StuDev's going to be mad at me, but y'all contribute to the common good so everyone can reap the benefits. And part of the benefits is calling your UUA for help or thoughts or partnership.
Thank you. Any last words or last thoughts, things that we forgot to ask you about, Bart?
I don't think so. I think all of the links are going to be in the show notes. But pretty much if you just tag on Thrive to the end of UUA.org, you'll get the Thrive program. Summer Seminary, you'll get the Summer Seminary ones. Not Thrive Summer Seminary, that'd be UUA.org/Summer Seminary. And if you have thoughts and ideas about where things might go, we're all ears.
I think we're going to get links to those things in our in the YouTube and the podcast. Christina, final thoughts from you?
As always, I'm just so grateful for what the Youth and Young Adult Office is doing, and the way you all are doing it. Much of last year, we saw the Youth and Young Adult Office lead how we wanted to be and look as the UUA, and so I'm just really grateful for how what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, as Bart said, our young people have led the way often in Unitarian Universalist history, so it should not come as a shock that they're at the vanguard of how our institution is changing for the better today. Next week we have Julica Herman de la Fuente coming on to talk about a new curriculum coming out of her consulting work with the FOS Collaborative called Creating Theology Together. Well, that should be a really exciting conversation, building on the notion that we do this faith development this faith development work for people of all ages. We're going to be talking about some faith development work next week, and we look forward to you joining us once again on The VUU. Thank you all. Have a great day.